Every Woman is Vietnam, the art of Le Faux, produced by the Le Faux Art Gallery. After enduring the privations and pressures of the German occupation, Le Faux settled in Paris in 1945, where he celebrated by exhibiting with Vu Cao Dam and May Tu at the Galerie Rue Henschel. In 1947, Le Faux met and married Paulette Vaux, the niece of a noted photographer. The couple, who went on to have two sons, Alain and Pierre, quickly settled into a harmonious marriage that would last for over 5 decades. Le Faux's art had opened up during the war towards a less classical mode of expression, influenced by post-impressionism. Although still painted on silk, his 1947 Reverie presents a reclining figure whose modeled features and expressively brushed surroundings demonstrate the artist's progress towards a less rigid style. Reverie also offers a sense of the model's inwardness, a new element in Le Faux's approach to his female subjects. Encouraged by his dealer Romanette to use brighter colors and to paint with oil on canvas, Le Faux continued to paint Vietnamese figures, but moved gradually towards a palette of complementary hues that was distinctively French. Along with his EBAI classmates, Vu Cao Dam, who had taken up painting during the war while metal was not available for casting sculpture, and May Tu, Le Faux was considered a leading figure of the Paris-based Vietnamese school whose art was increasingly sought after by post-war collectors. Le Faux's art took on a new tone during the 1950s, partly due to the advice of his dealer André Romanette, who urged him to paint with oil on canvas as well as on silk. Although Le Faux took this advice, painting only occasionally on silk into the 1960s, collectors would later covet the earlier silk paintings from the Romanette period. The oil paintings on canvas that were shown for the opening of Romanette's new Paris gallery in 1956 were from Le Faux's second period, which art historian Corinne de la Menonville describes as giving women as subject matter a central position, while rejoicing in a more alert and rhythmical brushstroke. Warm pastel colors, including yellows, oranges, and yellow-greens, set off by touches of complementary hues, created a new palette that connected it to both Asian and French influences. Le Faux was also beginning to paint flowers, both as bouquets and as part of lush gardens that surrounded his figures, reinforcing the Edenic feeling of his art. After the Le Faux acquired a country home in Normandy, Paulette cultivated a flower garden that provided fresh bouquets for her husband to paint. Through the magic of his brushes, Le Faux was able to create an air of enchantment, as Waldemar George describes in a 1970 catalog essay. George wrote that, quote, Le Faux's flower paintings spontaneously transform the most commonplace dwelling into a house of enchantment. In some cases, these flowers taken from nature give place to flowers sprung from some astral dream. One thinks of the fabulous plants of Redon, unquote. After signing on with the Wally Findlay Gallery in 1964, Le Faux moved into the most productive period of his career. His favored subjects, women, children, flowers, and gardens, were shaped into seemingly endless variations. From early religious art, Le Faux had gained an understanding of the way that paintings could express both paradise and purity in universal terms, and his canvases embodied a kind of paradoxical state. They show both the innocent view of a child and the sophisticated taste of an adult man. Le Faux was an artist suspended between two worlds, who remained Vietnamese in his habits, but deeply French in his aesthetics. He loved chatting with his close friends in Vietnamese, but spoke French when discussing art. Because he did not speak English, his wife Paulette, who did, accompanied him to his American openings to serve as translator. The popularity of his work, exhibited in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, established Le Faux's reputation in the United States and brought him prosperity. Although Le Faux stayed in touch with friends and relatives in Vietnam, he was generally quiet about the political events that unfolded during the 20 years of conflict between 1955 and 1975 that forever changed his homeland. My father did not want to be involved in political discussions about the situation in Vietnam, recalls his son Alain. One piece of wisdom that he sometimes offered to his family was this: keep silent and don't say anything. In his temperament, Lafaux was very much like the French painters Matisse and Bonnard, both of whom were represented by photos hung on the wall of his studio. In both art and life, Lafaux strove for quiet and harmony. His son Alain, who grew up observing his father's studio and work habits, offers these memories of Lafaux's activities and inclinations. My father was very affectionate with my brother and I. He was not very talkative and rather quiet. He had a very stable life for an artist and kept a regular schedule, working every day in his studio just after breakfast. He came out for lunchtime with us and then went back to work until around dinner time at about 7:30 or 8. I remember very well seeing him cleaning his brushes in the kitchen sink every morning. He was a hard worker, but since he worked at home, we saw him a lot. I spent time in his studio. The door was always open for us, but we understood that he shouldn't be distracted from his work, and we were usually very quiet. I did watch him paint, and I remember well seeing him standing up from his stool, moving back and tilting his head on the side to better see compositions. My father was indeed an elegant man. When he was young, he was very much into fashion, having his suits made to measure especially for him in Paris. He took the time to drive us around when it was holiday. We went to visit old churches and museums. We drove to Italy to see the frescoes and paintings at Toscana and in Venice. We spent a lot of time going to exhibitions and often went to the Foundation Mott in St. Paul de Vence in the south of France. My father was very familiar with modern art, and he took us with my mother to many modern exhibitions. In 1991, at the age of 84, Lafaux suffered serious injuries when he was struck by a motorcycle near his Paris home. He was released from the hospital, where his wife and sons visited every day, 5 months later after 2 surgeries, and again returned to his studio. A few years later, he told a friend that even though he had lived in France for more than 50 years, his soul was still in Vietnam. After donating 20 paintings to the National Museum of Fine Arts in Hanoi, he died in December of 2001 at the age of 94.